seriously after 11? I don't know.
I think people are still trying to scrape off their vehicles. I think everyone's still scraping their vehicles. Oh, yeah. I know I was late this morning too because of it.
Let's go ahead. Come on up, Will. Yeah. Yeah. Good morning to the raging masses that are assembled here at the Legion, and all those virtually tuning in. Welcome to you as well. You know, it's interesting because I look at this as the remedial class, the religious-based remedial class for us all. We believe firmly that church really starts at 12:15 or after we leave here and goes all the way till 11 o'clock the next week, and we come here on Sunday to kind of get recharged and reminded of where we should be and what we should be doing, and it's important to tune in or to come here and be involved. But just to keep that in mind, I guess, is very important also. You know, for the longest time, we've been dealing with this COVID thing. Some of you may or may not remember it. There's a relaxation of rules coming into play here, and for all those who are tuning in virtually, you now may be able to come and have a seat in the chair. We're up to 150 people that are allowed here, so that just covers the numbers that are usually here. So you're all more than welcome to come now. We may have to put out extra chairs, but that's an imposition we'll deal with at the time. And if you're so inclined and you call the gate your home church, we have when you come through the door here, you'll have our white box at the door greeting you to help out with that cause. If you're not coming, e-transfers are still wonderful. It's my understanding that even Herb Golden can do them now, so that just makes it's open to anybody now. So prayers. Vespers is still going on. We've been talking about this for quite some time. It's a very dedicated group, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. There's an address in the Gate News that you can send your requests to, and they're more than happy to help you out in that regard. This next item is, to say the least, appropriate. Maybe not wanted, but appropriate. Samaritan House, wonderful organization here in town. They do all sorts of great things. They are having a fundraiser, plain and simple. It's called Coldest Night of the Year. Now, could there be anything more appropriate than what we've been experiencing this year? Last 2 winters, little iffy, you know, somewhat suspect with the weather being warmer. This year, it's catching up for lost time because it looks like it's going to be cold again. Not to mention all the snow that we've got. It's at times like this that I wish our children weren't as old as they were and still at home so they could do the shoveling instead of me, but that's another story. This Coldest Night of the Year event is going to be happening on the February 26th. You can be involved if you want to sign up. Kevin has signed up. If you're not going to be there in attendance yourself, you can certainly support Kevin in that. And that's more of a monetary thing. We're not looking for long underwear and heavy socks. Okay, it's a monetary contribution. The next item always gets us excited, doesn't it, Kevin?
I've been waiting for you to see it.
I knew you would be. You know, I had the distinct honor and privilege of serving on the board for a couple of terms, and it is a great time. A lot of people shy away from it, as I did for the longest time, and I finally got over that hurdle and found it to be a very enjoyable time. The people who are involved are wonderful, and it's a great service and a needed service. And we have our AGM, the annual general meeting, although that's toned down from last year because I think it was the awesome and amazing, thank you, yes, the Quad A GM, which was fantastic, or the Tri-A, I guess, whatever. But it's next Sunday. We'd like as many people involved as possible. It's been a challenge this year with doing things remotely. Today is the last day to sign up to be able to vote. You can do that online. There's a link in the Gate News. It's board@brandongate.ca. So jump right on the computer after the service so that you can stay tuned. And this year the nominating committee is recommending Drew Kinsman. And Drew's willing to serve on the board, and we appreciate that. And what we would like is your agreement in that, and you can vote. That looks like it's about it. It is going to be a little trickier to vote also next week. There will be a Zoom link that you can get onto and vote if you're going to be virtual, or of course there will be the good old-fashioned ballot if you're here. And again, being here is not as big an issue anymore because of the fact that we can have 150 people. So as they say down south, y'all come.
Thanks, Will. I was remembering this morning a story I heard many years ago, and maybe some of you have heard of it, of an art contest that somebody put on. And they were inviting all artists to, put in their submissions of whatever beautiful art piece they had that would best represent peace. And so, of course, all these amazing art pieces came in, beautiful nature scenes, from still waters and sunrises and sunsets and majestic mountains with untouched snow and whatever. But then there was one piece that stood out, and it was nothing like the rest. And it was of a river with major rapids, and there was, just tumultuous water, and it was obviously a major storm happening. The wind is blowing, and there's rain and sleet, and there's this tree overhanging all this rough water, and it's being blown in the wind. And so you're going, what is peaceful about this picture? But in one of these branches overhanging the rough water is this nest. and in it is this little bird, and it's got its head under its wing, and it's fast asleep. And that was the piece that won the prize as best representing peace. When we think of peace, we want everything around us to be calm and to be nice and peaceful, as we would say. And yet, the kind of peace that God gives us is peace in the midst of the storm, just like that little bird. And you know, this morning I just had a strong sense that there are those of us who are really struggling with anxiety. And it could be related to all kinds of stuff. And you know, you may be waking up in the morning with just this feeling of anxiety, and you may not even know what it's connected to. It could be foreboding, you know, the fear of that bad things are going to be happening, or it may be connected to various issues in your own personal life or in the world around. And the invitation is there for each one of us to step into peace. Because Jesus is our Prince of Peace. He doesn't just give us peace, he gives us himself. In his presence, there is perfect peace. And so I'm going to invite you to stand with us, those of you who are here, do whatever you're wanting at home or wherever you're watching, and let's just let God love up on us. Let's let him fill us with his peace. We can just lay down what's causing that anxiety, trusting that he will take care of us and he will take care of those issues.
Come all you weary, come all you thirsty, come to the well that never runs dry. Drink of the water, come and thirst no more. Come all you sinners, come find his mercy, come to the table, he will satisfy. Taste of his goodness, find what you're looking for. For God so loved the world that he gave us his own and only Son to save us. Whoever believes in him will live forever. Bring all your failures, bring your addictions, come lay them down at the foot of the cross. Jesus is waiting there with open arms. For God so loved the world that he saved us, his one and only Son to save us. Whoever believes in him will live forever. The power of hell forever defeated. Now it is well, I'm walking in freedom. For God so loved the world. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Praise him for the wonders of his love. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Praise him for the wonders of his love. God so loved the world that he gave us his one and only Son to save. For God so loved walking in freedom, for God so loved the world. Bring all your failures, bring your addictions, come lay them down at the foot of the cross. Jesus is waiting, God so loved the world.
You know, I was having a conversation with a friend this last week, and I wish I could have sung her that verse, bring all your failures, bring your addictions, come lay them down at the foot of the cross, because she had just come through major crisis in her life, very, very, relational and addictions involved, and it was a huge crisis. And as she was unloading this on me, and I asked her, I said, you know, do you ever pray when you're struggling like this? Do you ever, because she wants to break free from these old patterns. And she said, no, she said, I'm not a person of faith. She said, besides, she said, I'm pretty sure God would be angry with me for all that I've done. And I just looked at her and I said, you know, that's not the Jesus I know. It's not the Jesus I see in the Bible. You know, I thought it was really powerful, a thing that I saw a while back, and it said, when we mess up, it's very telling how we respond. Do we run away and hide from our dad, or do we run to him? And it makes all the difference, and it depends how we view our dad. And we have a Heavenly Father that we can always run to, and He welcomes us with open arms, with love and forgiveness no matter what we have done. He is so good and so loving, and He is never gonna let us down.
Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, He is my song. You are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, He is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, He is my song. You are good, good. Oh, 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 you're never gonna let me down. 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 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, gave your life for mine. You nailed to the cross, you crucified all my sin and shame. It was washed by your mercy. You are the treasure I find, my reason for living. So let my life become an offering to the one who is worthy. All praise to the Lord Most High. All praise to the one who saved my life. All praise to Jesus Christ, our King of heaven, my King forever. You stormed the gates of my heart. The veil in between was torn apart. Now you hold the keys to the grave, 'cause you bring things to life and you roll stones away. All praise to the Lord Most High. All praise to the one who saved my life. All praise to Jesus Christ, our King of heaven, my King forever. All praise to the Lord Most High. All praise to the one who saved my life. All praise to Jesus Christ, our King of heaven, my King forever. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life down before you. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life now is for you. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life down before you. I lift my hands up, lay my whole life down, my whole life now is for you. All praise to the Lord Most High. All praise to the one who saved my life. All praise to Jesus Christ, my King of heaven, my King forever. All praise to the Lord Most High. All praise to the one who saved my life. All praise to Jesus Christ, our King of heaven, my King forever. My King forever. Yeah, yeah, yeah. My King forever. He is really good. Before you have a seat, why don't you take a minute and just say hi to somebody, elbow bump them, say hello. If you're watching on YouTube, take a moment to text somebody a hello and say, how are you doing? While you're grabbing something from the fridge at the same time. Yeah, I guess.
apologize, we did not do a mic check on this before. You'll do it on the fly. We can take our masks off, right?
I think
That
so.
looks like
Sure.
give or take 3.
I think when we're so close to, I think we're fine. Ba-ba-doo, ba-ba-doo.
Okay, and you know how to get us out of legacy and television, and then I'm gonna revisit the idea of selling the television into a way to reveal our heart.
Yeah, yeah, we have to.
When we talk removed justifying our share down under the hidden consequences of consumerism.
Mm-hmm. How are you doing? Yeah? Yeah. You knew they were expecting a baby? Oh, yeah. In August. Yeah. She's pretty excited. Both of you are. Yeah. Yeah, very happy for you guys. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it was pretty hard for us to maintain social distance in here, so we'll maybe have you start to be seated. Just yes, there we go. We just had someone say, I just couldn't do the online, I just had to be here. And I know like we're breaking the internet with like there's 13 people watching on YouTube, so you're welcome here, but we know there'll be hundreds more during the week.
I think the 13's low because there's actually, you know, like couples, right?
Oh,
so
there we go.
we've pretty much gone viral.
It's amazing. Just putting this up again, board at Brandon Gate, and for if you have not yet vote or signed up to be a voting member, that's where you do it. I just wanted to this seek God for the city and this low resolution graphic here that's showing that in 10 days is Ash Wednesday, and there was a couple in our city who go to one of the churches in our city that they sent this message to the BMA saying this is a pretty cool interdenominational sort of 40 days of prayer thing that get us walking our streets and praying for different aspects of our city. And we did it last year, and it was really great. What if churches in Brandon do this? And I looked into it, and I went, this is pretty good. So I've been floating it by several of our different leaders just to say, what do you think? Is it something that we ought to do too? And sort of with the selling feature, I think I was selling myself on it all the time, but just going, it makes a difference to me if there's other groups in the city doing the same thing. And so there's at least 2 other churches that are going to do this, and I've had mostly positive feedback. It's not like this amazing little, well, it is a cool little booklet. It's just a terrific little tool that just brings focus, some structure, and it's just a way as we're coming out of this pandemic to say, Lord, we're yours and we're oriented to bless the city. And so I think we're going to do it. So it starts Ash Wednesday, which is March 2nd, which is 10 days away. So maybe if you want to orient yourself to that, we have some booklets. Are they here, Wendy? No, we don't have them here. But a lot of people, we figured, would probably just want to use the app. So the app is $2.50, and you can download that. And if you want the app and the booklet, we can help you with that, because we have about 20 booklets, I think. So we're inviting you into that. In summertime, you do a summer salt. Now you do a winter salt, and it feels like that, and we actually need more salt on the ice. But anyways, if you're happy and you know it, I don't know if that makes sense to anybody. Yeah? Stamp your feet. All right. Picked up a hitchhiker, seemed like a nice guy. After a few miles, he asked me if I wasn't afraid that he might be a serial killer or something. I told him that the odds of two serial killers being in the same car were extremely unlikely.
Grounding.
Yeah. Money and the gospel. James Chambers, very happy to have you back with us 2 weeks ago. We started this series of talking about money and the gospel. We've been going through the Gate Church community practices, and practice number 5 in our bylaws talks about hospitality and generosity. And it takes some work to talk about money. So we carved out 2 Sundays to ask the question, what does Jesus really say about money?
I think we have 7 more messages to give.
7 more. Yes. So with the amount of information that came in online when we asked this question, like, I was blown away by the amazing response.
Maybe to start though by grounding where we're coming from today.
We do really have to. This is the important. It's the whole point of today.
Yes, we are talking about justifying our share. And just like a couple of weeks ago, we got to unpack this a little bit. But if you take nothing away from today other than this, by the end of the service, we want you on Facebook listing your TV for sale.
Selling your televisions.
That's what the message is today.
What we're about today.
If you have to disconnect online at this point, you probably sell your laptop anyways.
Just
so
imagine that TV that you have that you enjoy. We're going to sell it today.
How are they going to watch hockey?
I don't know.
They could give us their TVs.
We could. Actually, at the SDC at YFC, we could put all the TVs around the walls.
And watch them all at once.
At the same time.
Yeah, all the games.
How did that make you feel, just the idea of selling your TV? Or what about even giving it away just so you don't have it anymore? Oh, that's uncomfortable. Oh, you don't have one? Oh, you do? Oh, so you want to sell your TV? Maybe you just want to do a trade with somebody.
If you just set it for the right price on Facebook Marketplace, it will go. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. So we know that there's some discomfort with this whole conversation, because Jesus actually, in this passage that we're going to read today, says, sell your possessions. And so we're going to go there. But before we go there, we asked some questions online just to see what people would say. And I asked one day, how much money should you spend on your sweetheart? Should you ever take out a loan in order to do it right? And we had some, like one guy said, well, how about give her a crisp high five? Robin thought $100 million, that should be enough.
I would need a loan for that.
Yeah. Kyle Morehart just says $3.50, take it or leave it. Yeah. Joy actually won the prize because she says, I was happy because of how she said I didn't really need to give any money. The key to the figure is to figure out what's important to them and be creative and put some thought into it. And I said, yeah, Joy, you win. I don't have to spend any money. Actually, this is what one guy said, impress her with something expensive for Valentine's, jerry can of gas.
She looks pretty impressed.
Oh, so blown away. So then we did have this one question we put on, what bugs you about consumerism? And one of the things that came back, Robin said, she says, what really bugs me about consumerism is the hidden consequences of consumerism. That just really.
Yeah, and so the thing to call out here is that there's probably a whole sermon series on consumerism and the hidden consequences, but it speaks as well directly into what we're talking about when we're talking about generosity and what our fair share is and how we share with others. And what we have to do, though, is take the words that were spoken in the New Testament and recognize that they were spoken to a different people than the messages that came out in the Old Testament.
And if we do that well enough, we can excuse ourselves entirely from what Jesus is teaching.
I don't think the goal is to render the teachings irrelevant.
Yeah.
However, we do live in a world that is highly influenced by global economic trade relations, cross-oceanic boundaries. This was something that had the pretext of modernity. We would argue that we're in post-modernity. And then before that, we had the Industrial Revolution and the Mechanical Revolution. We had the Renaissance period. In the medieval times, there was the empire expansion through trades and the building of highways. And before that, this message that Jesus gave was to a different kind of culture.
Like a nomadic culture.
Post-nomadic and then
to a subsistence culture.
Into subsistence.
Yeah, like they were like 70 to 90%, they figure, of people were living like day to day subsistence, hand to mouth living, like give us this day our daily bread was like a real literal thing.
So the words that were spoken, not entirely irrelevant, but we do need to filter them through the context under which we live today. And we often talk about how do we hear words, how do we let the scripture affect us, and we have to think about it through the lens with which we look through. And today in our culture, we have this consumerism, this burden of consumerism under which we live.
And probably one of the things that Jesus said that just transcends all culture that we're going to get at today is when he just says you cannot love both God and money. Like you're going to love the one and hate the other, or despise the one and adore the other. Like you just can't do it. And so that's something, that love of money that Paul says is the root of all kinds of evil. Not the money, but the love of it. That is the thing that throughout all cultures, be careful.
Right. And I mean, I think that we would find the thing that's kind of condemning through all of this is that if you're reading right through to the end of a lot of these parables, the case for prosperity and simply coming into fortune because of our views and our relationship with God, it's not really well sustained through this. And here's a message which actually is the parable of the rich fool. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." And then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and all my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for years, for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God." And then Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. Life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable are you than the birds? Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Consider how the lilies grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it, for the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourself that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will not be exhausted, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Oh, so what a mouthful to consider. And it's like we could spend hours and days on this. One of the things that we approached a couple of weeks ago when we were in our other talk is this idea of the alphabet. People in church land sometimes have had an in or out idea with faith and following Jesus, and it's like if I give my certain percentage to the local church each month, or however you might define it, then I am in and I am okay. Versus being bad and not doing that. And so instead of that, we encourage people to just think, and I think Jesus does this for us. He keeps inviting us to, instead of a boundary kind of thinking, think towards the center. Like there's something rich and wonderful in the center. And so think in terms of a line of going from one letter to another. And you may not be very far down the generosity scale, but maybe instead of looking at being just really terrific or not, you're going, you know what, I'm going to today go from K to L. And, so it's a matter of locating yourself on there.
Right. So what Jesus was doing in this parable was calling out one end of the spectrum. And it was there are things that I deserve. These are things that should be mine. And it's this idea of chasing treasures for my own benefit, for an individual purpose, pulling these things towards me, making my world smaller, and having this getting heart. And, he calls it out really, really well here when he says, he says, these are the things I'm going to do. I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry. I can take life easy. And God says to him, you fool. That's not how this is going to work. Because if you die, what does this matter? What have you done?
And this, if there's any of the parables that Jesus said that almost speak so directly to our culture, like that line right there, just is a mirror for us. In my translation, it says, and I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. It's like that's the goal of our culture. That's
literally the marketing campaign of some restaurants.
Right.
Eat, drink, and be merry with people laughing around the table.
And that's exactly what God calls foolish.
So this idea of this path where we make our circle smaller and smaller, and we move towards this individualistic kind of thinking, Jesus calls out as the wrong path.
Yeah, totally. Because in that culture, they would have seen right away, they were so much more communally minded. So they're thinking, this guy is saying, I know what I'll do. I'll build bigger barns. And it's like, where's the communal thinking in that? It's just not there. They would have just gone, huh? This doesn't make sense.
And so immediately the contrast to that is the giving heart. And who better to come from this notion of a giving heart than from someone who, with so much generosity, literally put himself in our presence.
It's so funny because this guy has said, teacher, tell my brother to share his inheritance with me. And then Jesus goes off on this thing and, ends up saying, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. And you can just imagine this guy saying, I just want him to share with me.
I want my fair share.
Yeah, but then this is what Jesus is getting at. No. There is a getting kind of heart that you have, and I'm all about trying to encourage you to have giving heart as your goal. And this I found really convicting.
It is, because it's very easy for us to think of not just our TV, but if we told you to right now think of your ex and put it online for sale, what would that do to you? And how do we kind of evaluate ourselves on what we think of that possession or that thing? And when I say ex, as I said that out loud, it occurred to me that people might be thinking relationships. And
sell your ex on. There's a lot of people
not
that would
encouraging human trafficking here. It is very much the wrong path to be on if you get into human trafficking. Not a joke. But this call to have this level of generosity is not one that Jesus doesn't believe that we can do. In fact, there are multiple accounts of where Jesus called people into action to follow after him, believing in them so intensely that they almost had no other choice but to believe that he believed in them. And the very simple one that comes to mind is, of course, Peter walking on the water, Jesus calling out to him and saying, come to me across the water. The miracle in that moment, the realization that we have, isn't about the fact that Peter was able to walk on water. It was that Peter could do the things that Jesus was doing. And even in something so big and so grand as generosity that you would have to justify to other people, Jesus believes that we can do that too.
And that is what is being like the focus that Christ is after here is, it's like there has to be this shift from the heart that's focused on just, if I can just get enough, right? And just get things. And Jesus is saying, there's such a bigger world out here. Peter, you can walk on water. Matthew gets a vision of this big thing enough that he gets up from his table of money and his job and he leaves it to follow Jesus. It's like he's getting a picture of the grand thing, and I think this is what Jesus is really doing here, is saying you can have that grand idea towards generosity because God is this cosmic, generous person and inviting you on this journey together.
We experience this opportunity to evaluate how we approach these things when we're going to acquire things or go on vacation or add another property to our portfolio. We have these opportunities to do this. Angie and I, we have this dream of having a hot tub. We think this would be a great thing. And so when you start to look at it in terms of the getting heart or the giving heart, we have to start to kind of figure out, and in community is a good way to do this, to figure out where our heart is when we acquire this hot tub. And part of what we can do is we can lean on those in our lives for information about their experiences. And when we do this, especially if we're trying to do it as Jesus would have us do, we have to think about, are we looking for affirmation or advice? Because I know, for example, I've heard through the grapevine, I'm going to name some names out here, so I apologize, but Amanda has a hot tub and enjoys the time that it has created to spend with family and friends. I know that if I ask Amanda, she would probably recommend that we get a hot tub. I've talked to Mark, who has a hot tub. Mark and Sharon have a hot tub. And he said, well, it came with the house and I like watching the games with it. So sits in the hot tub and watches the football games. And
smokes cigars.
Whoa. But I don't know that Mark would outright suggest that we go and invest in a brand new hot tub to put in our backyard. And then if I talk to Keith and Judy have epitomized the generosity in the possession, sharing it not just with family and friends, but strangers, with our church to baptize people in their backyard, or to even, if Keith catches wind of anybody with a sore back, it's like, okay, my hot tub's open. I don't even have to be home. Just go. You don't even have to text me. Just go sit in the hot tub. And it's an entirely different thing. On the flip side of that, we know somebody who absolutely hated their hot tub experience. There were multiple electrical problems, electrical bills. There was a flooding incident. There was mold. There was just all kinds of things, and they're absolutely 100% do not get it.
Don't talk to them.
So when we're don't talk right, exactly. Where the Campbell's at. So when we're doing these things, we're exploring, we have to figure out, okay, am I doing this thing so that I can have it in my life for my pleasure? Because that's the getting part of it. Or if this is something that I can have in my life, that I can share with others and build community and stronger relationships in my life. And when we're thinking about more of it in the smaller circles and serving us and our immediate needs, I know what I will do with this resource. Then we're living in this world of persistent indulgence. And so when we're talking about from the A to the Z over here, the persistent indulgence lives on the one end of the spectrum. And on the other side of it is this idea of moderated celebration, something that Jesus shares quite a bit. When Angie and I moved to Calgary, when we left Brandon, I think Angie was making, together, we were making a combined maybe $18 to $20 an hour. And when we moved to Calgary, the first contract that I got, it was the height of the .com boom. And if you could spell HTML, you were in for good money. And the first contract that I got was about $85 an hour. And we went from having 2 months of income given to us every 2 weeks. And we were eating out. We were eating out a lot, sometimes twice a day. And when I say eating out, it wasn't just fast food. I mean, like, we were at restaurants where it was $100 or more for us to eat out. And it didn't matter because it just felt like the money kept coming in. And we were indulging again and again and again. This one day we'd actually eaten out for lunch. It was probably fast food for lunch. We were doing some shopping at one of the big shopping centers. And then we went to Jack Astor's for supper that night. And on the way home, we heard this report about the status of Canadians eating out. And this was the year 2000, and Canadians were now on average eating out twice a month. This was the most in history. They were eating out twice a month. And that day we had eaten out twice. And we're like, are we doing this wrong? Today, with Skip or Dash on your phone, you can eat out 3 times a day. And there are people who do order food in every day. This idea of indulgence was something that was spread out, and Jesus's model of it was quite different.
What we see in this passage, and I love how he talks about the Father's abundance in terms of, look at how the Father takes care of the ravens. Look at how the Father looks after the flowers of the field. Like, they are dressed in better than Solomon. And the idea is actually that the Father is really abundant. And there's this extravagance or this abundance in God and in the kingdom. And so it's like the opposite of that end of persistent indulgence isn't, suck your cheeks in and go on bread and water.
Right. And absolve yourself of anything where there might be eating and drinking and being merry.
Yeah. The opposite seems to be enjoy God's extravagance with others, right? Because you see, he turns water into wine at this big celebration, this big, feast. And it's like, it was good wine at the end. And everybody got to enjoy it. Or you see Jesus feeding the 5,000, and then there was extra. Everybody had their fill, and then there was extra. There was 12 baskets full, and lo and behold, there was 12 disciples. So it's this picture of there is enough and more than enough. And if we're viewing it in the right way, if we're participating with God in the right way, it's this this idea of enjoying the abundance of God in community. The final little story I'm thinking of is the master of the banquet, when he just says, he just wants everybody to come in and enjoy it. Like there's this moderated celebration. I think that's when we're spending more on what we enjoy. I think it could be that picture of, well, who's going to enjoy it with me? Is this all for me, or is there a way I'm building some hospitality into this?
Right. And so if we let ourselves rest in that persistent indulgence, what, we talked about a couple of weeks ago is this idea that the things that you once owned now own you. And living and dwelling in that persistent indulgence, that leads for us to start becoming very fond of our possessions and finding comfort in our possessions. There are people who I know who, if they learn of a friend who has a louder stereo or a bigger TV, they will immediately place the order for the louder and bigger TV stereo. It is something that they just have to, they're not happy with what they have unless it's the best, or at least the best around them. And that kind of comfort is very, very temporal. It's not gonna stick around very long. And if that TV stops working, then we might not have as much joy out of that item as we were having. Whereas on the other end of this is this idea that we can find contentment in the kingdom, not in the things that we have, but in the situation that we find ourselves with the people who are around us.
Which, it just goes back to this giving heart versus a getting heart. Like, is that really my heart's goal? Like, am I really hoping that my heart becomes more giving? And then that's the end goal, that I am extravagant in that way, like Christ, trusting in God for how my needs are going to be met. Like, I mean, it's just a hard reset to go, actually, I want it for me.
Right. And you had mentioned that those were pattern forming things, right?
Yeah.
The idea of if we have that heart that starts to shape where when we share versus protecting or hoarding or keeping for ourselves, it starts to form our patterns of behavior.
It's formative. I mean, Jesus says where your treasure is, there's where your heart is too. And so, I mean, I think we could use that to beat ourselves up and go, well, my heart is off a lot on this world. Well, it is formative if we just begin to put our treasure and begin playing it out. And of course, Jesus heads towards that when he says, sell your TVs.
Right, exactly. You guys have already put a description up, right, on Facebook? Sell
your TV and buy a hot tub.
I think we just solved the Bible. I think that's... Who among you can add a single hour to your life about worrying? This calls into question a lot of how we approach everything from insurance to savings to financial planning. The things that we desire to buy and to have in our lives, and then the ways that we protect them. Those are all things that kind of speak to legacy.
It just gets back to what is that, like, in our culture, the whole idea of if I save up and if there's lots extra, then I am leaving it to the next generation. It's the idea of leaving the treasure to the next generation. And I think in terms of justifying, that's how we justify saving up a whole bunch and not spending, or not giving or whatever.
Right, acting out generosity.
But it's like there needs to be this shift of, what if I learned a generous heart and experienced the wholeheartedness and the life of that, and then what am I passing on to the next generation? It's a legacy. It's a legacy of of life, like of real life and living. There's just, yeah, you have to swallow hard and say that means I might not leave them as much money.
Right. When we ask the question, or when we pose the challenge, you're going to list your TV today on for sale. Is your thought, oh, well, how am I going to watch my Netflix? Or is your thought, how am I going to have people over to watch the game? And and I'm oversimplifying. This is obviously just a very simple, shallow example, but it's a way that we might be able to start to say to ourselves, what is the reason why I actually want the thing that I say that I want? Is it to kingdom build, or is it to self-satisfy? Is it some gratification that I need in my life? Because now that I want the hot tub, it's pretty easy to get me into a place to get the hot tub, because there's this idea of scarcity that might come into play. So if we're wondering, yes, you had a question?
I wanted to continue a little bit. When you talk about justifying our share, and when you talk about like my hot tub specifically, I felt really strongly about having to justify getting a hot tub. Because I feel like there was no reason why I could or should have a hot tub, and I felt like it was finding comfort in possessions first. And I very intentionally felt like I needed to justify my share, and to do that, to get to the scale of finding contentment in the kingdom, to help persuade you to get a hot tub, what I did was like made it no cell phones in the hot tub, no watching TV in the hot tub, and I very much found myself connect with my backyard, nature, and God. And it's a very intentional place of connection with people and with God. So I pray in the hot tub. I think of things, and I've had conversations with my friends and my kids about things that I never would have if I didn't have it. And so I feel like I'm really connecting with what you're saying, and I thought that this would be a good way to persuade you to get.
So that's awesome, and we love you, Amanda, but you're stealing our sermon right now. So we were going to say these things. So, and if you're online, Amanda didn't say anything. Okay, so no, the challenge, but this is actually really good, because the what we're talking about is this sense of how do we justify these things? How do we pull them in? And one of the challenges is when we do start to say, okay, this is the direction that I want to move in. If we're on our way home and there's a radio advertisement for a hot tub that's 20% off, but the sale ends this Saturday and then it's gone, then we start to get into this idea of, I won't ever get this if I don't do it now. And that can rush our decision, and it can remove that opportunity that we have to decide whether or not we watch TV in the hot tub, which may or may not be a good thing. And we're going to talk about that after with Mark and Amanda. But for us, the important piece there is that we have that moment of reflection, and we don't fall into this idea of scarcity, which is
a hallmark of the consumer culture and society. You and I were talking about the different people we know that are at these different levels, like, and it's all kind of relative, right? Like you are aware of some people that with huge amounts of properties and they're selling one, you know, because it's a little too much. Anyway, but it's all sort of relative, because with the consumer culture, there just really never is enough, is there? And that's the whole scarcity thing, and it can get into our system, and that is the whole focus of life, is towards having enough. But when do you know if you've had enough?
Is it when I have enough this week or this year or for retirement or for my kids or for legacy for my grandchildren? The title of today's talk is Justifying Our Share, and there's a double entendre there, because in one way we're saying, I'm going to stake out claim to the things that rightly belong to me. But what if we flip that on its head and we were thinking about being so generous and sharing so much that those around us would think that we were crazy? We had to explain ourselves to them. And we had to justify the action of sharing. When I traveled to Saint Martin, on the French side of the island, there's a Dutch and a French side. You pull up to port. There's I actually flew in, which is another experience, by the way. We'll talk about that some other time. But when the cruise ships arrive, they pull into port at an area called the Boardwalk, and there's all the wonderful shops and everything. And the next street in, if you go down a block, is called Front Street, and Front Street is beautifully decorated, and there's all these shops or whatever. And then you go one more street in, and it's called Back Street. And if you don't live on the island and you're on Back Street at night, chances are you're going to find yourself on the wrong side of the dirt. In fact, we found ourselves on, it was about 5:15, and a taxi pulled up to us, screeched, and like threw the door open. It was a minivan, and they said, "You guys get in here right now. We don't need another dead tourist." And because that would be bad for taxis. So he drove us to a hotel, didn't even charge us for it. And as we drive back, we're going down Back Street, or we're winding around, and you're looking out, and the homes are decrepit. There's such a striking level of poverty that in some cases, people who are more affluent and they would like to replace their car, you're not allowed to dispose of the vehicle, but you can sell it to somebody who doesn't have as much money, or you can actually pay them to take the title of the vehicle. And because it costs so much to ship the garbage off the island, what you can do is you can give someone $50 or $15, and they'll just keep a crushed car in their front yard. So we're driving down Back Street, and there's houses that are falling apart. Toilets, where the back of the toilet, literally there's a hole in the wall where the bathroom would be in the house, and the toilet just flows into the yard. And the house is falling apart, and there's 3 cars stacked in the lawn, and you understand pretty quickly how these people are living. And yet, if you just fix your gaze up the hill, at the top of the hill, listed there was a house that was for sale. It was a $14 million home. And the trees that were at the front of the property made it such that when you're out on your deck or enjoying the pool, you could see the beautiful ocean and the beach and the beautiful blue sea and the cruise ships coming and going, but you didn't see the slums at the bottom of the hill. It was quite the $14 million home.
And that's just side by side.
Right up the hill. And a way to completely escape from what was happening down below. Justified, of course, because they'd earned that share.
And then colliding with that same view or that same picture that James just painted, I was listening to a professor talk about a friend of his who lived in one of those $14 million homes, or in that kind of situation where side by side across the street was just slum. And he had just done quite well for himself in businesses and everything. And then he lives in this home so close to poverty, and he's got a huge dining room table that overlooks the ocean. And every night at supper, the table is open, and people from the area of poverty come in and enjoy food together with him. And he creates community and starts doing a life of with.
And it's the opposite side of that. It's being so generous that those in your life, those other $14 million homeowners would look at this guy and say, "What are you doing?" And he would just be like, "Meh, Jesus."
Yeah. And he would be in a spot of trying to justify his sharing habit. But it just comes down to Jesus.
In Luke 12, verses 22 to 31, the theme there is quite obvious. There is this notion that while we are here, that we will accrue resources. It might be money, it might be property, it might be whatever. But Jesus calls us out to invest money in ways that bring heaven to people rather than putting hell in your soul. And that's a powerful message when we're looking at what we have, when we've already won the lottery, being here in Canada and not born in the Congo or any other place where struggling to find food for you and your kids would be a challenge.
So where are you at today? Is your heart fixated on having enough? When scarcity studies says that scarcity mindset people, it lowers your IQ, it limits your brain function, it makes you more impulsive. Do you get that? Versus Jesus inviting us to walk on water when it comes to generosity.
And there's a really amazing thing there too, because I mean, we have Peter being called to walk out on the water, and what happens? He starts to fall. He starts to sink in the water, but that's not the end of the story.
He gives this little correction to Peter about his lack of faith. And then some have said, it wasn't just faith in Jesus, it was faith that he could actually do this, that he's being told
what Jesus was
doing what Jesus is doing. But then they walk back to the boat together. And I think for us, when we went into the study, I was going, there's been times when on this alphabet scale, I felt like I was up in R and S, now I feel like I'm back in B and C. What does it take today to just realize, what? It's a big God that we serve, and we're in a very abundant kingdom, and just begin to let the generosity of God begin to flow through again.
Kevin asked me to talk on stuff, some of this regarding money, and he in the invitation, he said, would you want to speak again? I'm like, oh, that's great. He's like, well, we'll be talking about money. I'm like, because there's a lot of stuff out there about how we should manage things. And in one of the most practical examples that we've got of Jesus talking about money, he tells them to sell everything. And we know that that's a message for a people in a time, and we have to find what that means for us. How do we move along this path, knowing that Jesus will be there to pick us up and help us move forward again, even if we struggle as we move forward. So as you go about this week, may you find the way to take steps from wherever you may be, all the way on the one side from having a getting heart towards finding contentment in the kingdom and not in the things that we own, lest they own us. May you find ways to increase your generosity and to find joy in that, and to encourage those around you to do the same. Have a great week.
Amen. Thanks, James. Yeah. Woo. Yeah, we'll see you next Sunday for the awesome and amazing annual general meeting.